Welcome back to Track Talk here on Sports Radio 810 WHB. Don't forget, you can listen to the ASCS 305 Southwest Shootout on RacinBoys Radio tonight. Gets underway about 7 o'clock local time. So if you're into what's going on in sprint car racing or 305s, don't forget RacinBoys.com, the home of ASCS. Joining us now is a friend of the RacinBoys and a guy that we've got to know over the last couple of years, the Postman, Steve Post. How you doing, Steve?
Good. What's going on, boys?
Oh, life in the big city here in the Midwest, man. So, just it feels good to be home for a change, just out on the road all the time, as you know.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I actually, with PRN having Vegas and Bristol, it's like a 2-week off period here over for myself, and it is nice. And but I'm looking at the calendar, knowing that the home time is about over.
Yeah, I know it. When we go out to the Northwest with the ASCS National Tour, well, we've got a rough signal right there, Steve, where you're standing. We get out there. I think we're gone like 13 nights. Or 16 nights, wow. I think, is in July and August. So, yeah, I know what you're feeling. Do you get stir crazy like I do when you get home, though? You travel so much, you're running around all over the place, but you come home, you're home for a week, and you're ready to hit the road again. Is there some kind of disease called I don't want to be home disease?
Yeah, really is. The way mine goes is, and I'm a father of 2 girls. I'm a single dad. So the beauty of my situation is that by the time we hit November, the end of the NASCAR year, I am ready to be home for December, and that's the greatest month in the world for a father to have off. It's just fantastic, and just love doing that. But about the time we get to about the second week of January, then I start getting stir crazy, and I the way I kind of do it is I kind of have an on and an off, and that off I'm perfectly fine with December, but once the on starts to get going in January, and then once we hit February, it's game on, and I'm the same way. In fact, there's a big dirt late model race in Lancaster, South Carolina tonight. I'm going to sneak down there and catch that. I just you're right. Once you have a little time at home, especially during the season, it's time to get moving again.
That's what I love about you the most, Steve, is that you are a dirt track guy. And we'll get into a little bit of Wing Nation here in a bit, but let's talk about what's going on in NASCAR right now. Tony Stewart picks up the win last week. I've got to say, Darren Grubb leaves and Addington comes in, and we've got all this big change, but one thing doesn't change, and that's Tony Stewart still running up front towards the end of last year, and now probably the best start we've seen for him in the Cup Series.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. In Tony's terms, he's 7th in the point standings, which is unheard of for him in the early part of the season. And Scott, the thing I like about this is that this whole Darian Grubb moving over to Joe Gibbs Racing, Tony moving him out and moving Steve Addington in. The beauty of it is with Hamlin and Grubb getting the win at Phoenix, 3 races in, we can say, this might have been a win-win for everybody. But to Tony's situation, he just has been on fire, winning the 5 chase races and now one of the first 3 here, and just a couple of top 10 finishes this season, just off to a great start. And I don't know what that means because we've never seen it before from Tony. Right. And the way his game usually goes is he gets better, and if he gets better from this, it's going to be tough.
He's really mastered these restarts, hasn't he, Steve?
Oh, it's crazy. And where he learned it from, and he will gladly give credit to, is the sprint car racing. Mm-hmm. Getting a good start in sprint car racing after the Ford 400 down at Miami last year. Someone asked him about restarts, and he said he learned that from starting alongside of Donnie Schatz and Steve Kinzer and Sammy Swindell and guys like that. And so it's really ironic that, and when we watched last week's race at Vegas, it was restarts. So it was, again, his sprint car stuff that really gave him the edge in winning that race.
I think they found something in the transmission and the gearing, too, a combination to be able to get up through the gears and make, a little separation between him and the car starting behind him as well. I got to step back here just a second, though. Do we really know what happened with Darian Grubb and Tony Stewart? I mean, they say all the right things. They parted ways, but what was the real issue there? Do we know yet?
Well, let's look back to Tony in August of last year. Mm-hmm. We don't belong in the chase. We're just taking up a spot. We're terrible. They were terrible at Bristol in August. I think the wheels fell off from that thing in August. And the way it is with decisions and contracts and new people and talking to this one and moving this one out, the process takes 10 or 12 weeks.
Right.
And I think the wheels fell off the 14 car in August. I really do. Miraculously, they were able to put them back in starting the second week of September. But the problem is the decisions were already made and the horses were already out of the barn at that point. So they just decided to suck it up and deal. And I think, when you look at, let's set the chase aside. Let's set the chase aside. Going into that chase, if you'd have told me Tony Stewart's making a crew chief change, I'd have said, yeah, absolutely, I believe it. And I think that's what happened.
Well, it's puzzling, Yeah. And then Grubb, he comes out and gets that win with Hamlin and everything, and everybody's happy. I guess that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and I will say this. For people who knew 6 weeks, Darian was formally told before Charlotte last year. And the whole Addington thing was swirling around then and everything else that Darian was told then. I think the one thing we can say about Darian Grubb and Tony Stewart and everyone there is they handled that whole situation with so much class, because there was a lot of rumbling and a lot of stuff going on there. And people just kind of kept it buttoned up, did their business, won the championship, then told everyone what they were doing. And really, the start of this year, Tony has had some rave reviews of Darian. Darian has said good stuff about Tony. So it has been kind of something. I think there's times where we get frustrated when things are handled poorly, and we say, these athletes these days, these people these days. But then here's one where it seems like everyone's doing the right thing, and it's like, well, that's a little boring. So I wish we had the dirt on it, but I guess we're never going to do that.
Yeah, it's not like Tony Stewart changes crew chiefs every year. He had Greg Zipadelli for years.
Well, and listen, your stock goes up if you do the right thing and you handle it professionally. I mean, we see guys when they leave teams and they start running their mouth and they start dogging on the team. That doesn't do their stock any good. I mean, you have to – I don't know. Do we lose Steve there?
We might have to try to read.
All right, we'll get him back. But that's important, though. You know what I'm saying? If you're going to be a crew chief and you want to get to the highest level and work with the elite drivers in this series, you can't go around ripping on your crew chiefs that you had in the past or your teams. Look how many guys we've seen flame. Jeremy Mayfield comes to mind. Kirk Busch comes to mind. Guys that have flamed their teams or their sponsors or their crew chiefs when they leave. What does that really get them in the end?
It just doesn't do anybody any good at all. And Darian Grubb's a good guy. I mean, it's personalities that's got to mesh for this to work. And, Darian Grubb's a great crew chief, but Tony Stewart needs the certain type of personality that he's comfortable with. And maybe Darian Grubb, it's not his fault, just didn't quite mesh the same way as, say, Greg Zipadelli did for all those years when he was over at Joe Gibbs Racing.
To me, it seems like the chemistry amongst all the leaders over there at Stewart-Haas Racing are clicking together. The chemistry. They seem natural at being friends on and off the track. And I think that's important. You really, every driver wants to be best friends with his crew chief because that makes for the best chemistry. And I think what we're seeing with Addington and Tony and all the guys over there, everybody from Ryan Newman's team on down the ladder, I think all of them seem to gel really well.
Well, you can see that. You can see that with Tony Stewart's demeanor, and he's just much more comfortable right now. And I think he's even going to be stronger than he was last year, if that's ever possible.
If that is possible. Steve, I thought we lost you there for a second. Let's move on. We were just talking about Tony. Let's move on to what's happened with Jimmie Johnson and Chad Knaus. Let me ask you this, Steve, because I'm sure you have an opinion on it, but I just got to ask you. With being suspended and fined 3 times for blatant infractions in the past, in NASCAR's eyes, let's say, and do you think that when the other teams inside the garage area, we know what the fans think when they look at that, but do you feel that the teams look at their 5 championships and say, they might not have won those 5 championships, or do they feel like maybe they've gotten away with some things to give them an unfair advantage over the year? Is there any animosity towards Chad Knaus and the other teams by getting caught so many times and winning 5 championships on top of that?
No, and I think what counters that, I think the thing that counters that is the level of respect that Jimmie Johnson has. And Jimmie is. It is really ironic for a 5-time champ. Jimmie is the most underrated driver in the business right now.
I agree.
And I think Jimmie kind of offsets that. I think everyone knows that is a whale of a race car driver. And yeah, Chad might have pushed the elements a little bit here and a little bit there, but over the 5-year course of time, they won a fair amount of that stuff legit, or Jimmie's talent has shown itself through time and time again. So I think what animosity might be there toward Chad may be offset by the respect that Jimmie has in that garage area. Now, a story with Chad was back probably 5 years ago. They had him and Alan Gustafson. There were the two crew chiefs on I forget which pair it was, Jeff Gordon and Tony Stewart, I believe. Well, it wouldn't have been Jeff. Someone else was. When they put the shocks in backward at Dover and won the race up there. And NASCAR race came because all the parts were there, but they had a couple of the fittings inside of the shocks backward, which gave them an advantage. And I had a driver stand on the back of a trailer telling us, I can't believe Chad Knaus does this. I can't believe he does this, and I can't believe NASCAR allows him to get away with it, and it's embarrassing for the sport, and he's just railing on him. Turns around when that media availability was over, walks up in the front and lit his crew chief up.
Really?
Because he didn't think of it.
Wow.
And this was a top flight driver at the time and lit his guy up. So there's a degree of animosity, but some of that animosity is, why didn't you think of it, to their own guy? It's a weird dynamic we have in NASCAR.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I've got to say that I feel that if a car rolls through inspection and it hasn't made one lap of practice out on the racetrack, they should be allowed to fix the problem. That's just my opinion. I raced for 35 years, on and off for 35 years, and I know that at our local asphalt tracks at the time that we would go through and do a pre-race inspection. And if there was an issue, they'd say, fix that before you race tonight. I think it's a little unfair that NASCAR penalizes a team like they do before the car ever rolls out on the track. I think they should be allowed to have a little time to fix the problem. If they've made one practice lap, I get it. But before, I think they should give them a break.
And I think that's the genesis, the nexus of Hendrick's appeal. Is exactly what your point is that car never was put on the racetrack. It was just presented to NASCAR. And so, and personally, I agree with you. But the same scenario played out with this team at Infineon, and I hate this precedent because you can find a case for everything, Right, but. Right. They've done it in the past is the only thing I can say on it. But I'm in total agreement with you. To me it seems a little strange, and I believe that's what Rick Hendrick is arguing as well.
Is as long as the crew chief is hired to do what he does, and that is push the envelope. That's what he's paid to do. As long as that continues to be the case in NASCAR, these kinds of incidents will continue to happen, won't they? Until NASCAR decides to really put a stop to it, and the only way to do that is park the car?
Yeah, I mean that's the way it is in sports. Why do we have all the rules in sports? Because athletes and competitors will try to stretch to the limit whatever it is, and whether it's dangerous substances that other athletes are putting into their bodies, or whether it's pushing a fender out, or whether it's this, that, or the other thing. That's the nature of sports, and that's the nature of NASCAR. And as much as they try to patrol it, as big as the fines are, as big as the point penalties are, the 48 bunch went to Daytona with something that was a little different. And so they still try stuff, still try to get that advantage.
I think NASCAR is a little concerned. They don't want it to get back to the Twisted Sister cars. I owned a couple ARCA cars, and I got my bodies from RCR. And let me tell you, manipulated is an understatement. And the cost to manipulate those bodies and to figure out how to manipulate them in the right areas is astronomical. In NASCAR, when the car of today first rolled out, they were adamant about saying how, there's no tolerance. You can't do anything to these bodies. They've kind of loosened up a little bit on that, haven't they?
They have a little bit.
Not much. Yeah.
Not much, as we found out. But your point, they do not want to go back to the Twisted Sister is exactly what's driving this. That is exactly what the point is, because the Twisted Sister, the race car that was massaged on this corner and moved on that corner, the kind that you bought from RCR and couldn't even get on your frame, you're thinking, how in the world did they do this?
Right.
That's the kind of bodies we had. But each one of those changes costs a fortune to get to in wind tunnel time and engineering cost. And exactly the Twisted Sister is why NASCAR is working so hard to try to enforce these rules.
NASCAR's also trying to get the stock look back. Dodge, they show their new car, but they don't know who's going to be driving them next year. What do we know there, Steve, with Dodge?
Good news and bad news. We've got a beautiful race car, and our future lies in Robbie Gordon. I don't know. It's now they say that you're right. They have the timing on this could not have been worse for Dodge. A week before they're unveiling the new race car, Penske announces he's going with Ford. So they don't have a team. Now, in listening to the folks at Dodge, they say that they've had some interesting phone calls and conversations. The problem is almost twofold, because not only do they need to find a team, and that can come over time. The biggest challenge they have is an engine supplier, and they need to be working on engines, especially with electronic fuel injection and all the new technology. Whoever's doing the engines needs to be working on them now. I mean, Doug Yates and Jack Roush and Danny Lawrence up at RCR and the guys over at Hendrick Motorsports and all of these guys are massaging these engines as we go. So every day they massage means another day that Dodge is going to be behind the eight ball. So to me, the biggest element of this is who's going to do your motors. Do they bring it in-house and do something like Toyota Racing Development does, where the manufacturer does it? There's an engine builder in Martinsville, Virginia, Joey Arrington, son of Buddy Arrington, one of the great, old independent racers, who has been in that Dodge fold for years and years. Do they just say, here is a boatload of money, get on this, we don't know who our team is going to be, but you need to be developing this, and that's going to be something that plays out over time. My hunch is they've invested a lot in this car because they unveiled it, they've tested it, they've done a lot with it. My hunch is they're going to be into it, or I believe they're going to be into it. They state they're going to be into it, but it's just going to be interesting to see who's wheeling those cars.
It's interesting to me because Penske had the full support of Dodge. Now, and they were saying all the right things just a few weeks before this announcement came down that Penske was pulling out of Dodge. They get all the support. Dodge was saying, hey, we like working with one team. We put all of our efforts into this one team. It's a little surprising to me. All right, Steve, let's move on to some good stuff, what we like to talk about around here. Let's talk about Wing Nation. Man, what a great show you got going on there. True sprint car fan yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I grew up I probably fall into the category of dirt track fan. I grew up with the big block dirt modifieds up in the Northeast. And love all dirt track racing. But we started 2 years ago. We're in our third season now. So 3 years ago, we wanted to branch out. MotorRacingNetwork.com. That's the mothership of MRN, obviously, with the website. They wanted to branch out beyond NASCAR. They wanted to become more involved, and they said, "Hey, if someone's interested in something, let's do it." So 3 years ago, or 2 full seasons ago, did a World of Outlaw report, and the thing got pretty popular. As you know, guys, sprint car racing and sprint car fans, they're ate up with it. I mean, you guys do it with RacinBoys and what you guys do as well. And so, very good friend of mine, Kendra Jacobs, is the daughter of sprint car legend Kenny Jacobs. Kendra and I have been buds for 10 years. We've been really good friends. And so we did a Knoxville preview that year, a regular 1-hour radio type show. And the reviews were fantastic. She'd never done a radio show. We got done with it. Our producer said, Kendra, how long have you been doing radio? And she said, well, right now, 60 minutes. And, she blew everyone out of the water. And see, the beauty of it is Kendra's family in the sprint car world. I'm some radio guy, Kendra's family. So last year we launched Wing Nation, which covers wing sprint car racing. And, we cover World of Outlaws, All-Stars, Pennsylvania, Knoxville, California, ASCS. Love covering the ASCS stuff that you guys do such a great job with. And so consequently, we've kind of branched this thing out and kind of talk wing sprint cars every Tuesday at noon on MotorRacingNetwork.com, and we just have a blast with it.
Tuesdays at noon on MotorRacingNetwork.com. Listen to Wing Nation. If you're a sprint car fan, we have a lot of sprint car fans here in the Midwest. I don't know if you know this about Kansas City, where we broadcast from, but this was a mecca of sprint car racing back in the day. The Weld family was here. There's so many Hall of Famers that are in the Knoxville Hall of Fame that live here even today in Kansas City. I don't know if you know this, Steve, but in 1957, A.J. Foyt won his first USAC midget race about 2 miles from our studio here at Olympic Stadium. Little nugget of information there. Yeah.
That is cool, and it doesn't surprise me. Sprint car racing in the Midwest is absolutely huge, and I know some tracks have gone away and things, but even when we come out to the races out of Kansas at the big track, there are a lot of dirt tracks in the area, meaning a lot of great sprint car races. Doing whatever they're doing along the way as far as sanctioning and groups and tours go, but a lot of great dirt tracks out there. So that's not a surprise that the hotbed of sprint car racing is. It's funny because there's so many. Here's the great part about sprint car racing: there's so many parts of the country that can claim, "Well, we're the hotbed of sprint car racing."
Right.
I mean, you guys rightly so. Up in Knoxville, rightly so. The hotbed of sprint car racing. Up in the Dakotas, rightly so. Over in Pennsylvania, wow. Over in Ohio,
it's everywhere.
And California, which is the beauty of it is the hotbed of sprint car racing is America.
I like it.
Well, another place is California, where the World of Outlaws are at right now. Tim Kading winning his second in a row last night out at Thunderbolt, Steve.
Yeah, Kading's been on fire, and I guess listening to the coverage, he put it on the cushion and just drove around first Jason Sides for second spot and drove around Steve Kinzer for the lead and kind of dominated at that point. Had a little rain delay in the middle of it, but we're able to do it. Kading, the first two-time winner, and Kading drives from, and I have no knowledge of Dennis Roth other than what I hear. It sounds like one of those very unique owners. Tim Kading told us on Wing Nation last year. Yeah, you laugh, so you're validating what I'm assuming. I guess.
Yes.
And, the end of last year, he won the championship with Roth. They're done. They're out of business together and everything like that.
It's about the third year in a row we've heard that one, I think.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. It's 5 races into this year. They're the first multi-time winner of a World of Outlaw race. So pretty cool stuff for Tim Kading, yeah.
No doubt. And the national tour, you had a good time down at Canyon. I know that we did, and then we went over to Yuma. We've had 4 national tour races, 4 different winners as well.
Yeah, and I got to say, the first, Scott, as you know, last year, you hooked me up with the race over in Grain Valley. Man, for whatever reason, I get Quarry in there.
Well, it's because you couldn't find the place.
Well, there's that too. That too, exactly. And so was able to hit the ASCS opener in Canyon and just blown out of the water with how good the races are and how great the competition is with ASCS. And we kind of had some fun because Tony Stewart ran those 2 races, and going into Yuma, Tony was 5th in ASCS points.
Yeah, I know.
And we were busting on him about, I wonder if he should stick to ASCS. Well, of course, then he goes and wins Vegas, and it's like, well, maybe that NASCAR thing might just work out for him. But you guys, some great racing. It sounds like Yuma was phenomenal. It sounds like that Saturday night finale, last lap pass, was unbelievable. And so love following along with you guys on RacinBoys.com and listening to the coverage and getting to know some of these racers a little bit, like a Jason Johnson, who we had on our show last week, and just fun to chat with him and listen to his story. And there's going to be others as we go into this season that we'll be getting to know. I actually talked with Wayne Johnson for a bit out there, and it's just a real thrill to see this ASCS tour, something that I've been reading about over the last couple of years, and get my chance to get my arms around it, and it's been a lot of fun following along with it.
No doubt about it, and I think it builds the credibility what we have with Ricky Stenhouse now being a part owner with JJR, with Jason Johnson, and we see Tony, and we see a lot of the Outlaw guys out there hanging out with us as well on the national tour. All right, Steve, sounds like your phone's having a heyday there. We're going to let you go. Thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
You got it, boys. Sorry for the phone. I'm not sure what the deal is with it, but I guess it's having a Saturday morning also. But good chatting with you, and we'll talk to you guys. We don't talk to you before. We'll see you in a couple of weeks out in Kansas.
We'll be there.
All right, Steve. Thanks so much.
There he is,
good
Steve
man
Post.
right there, Steve Post.
You can hear him cover the pits on MRN Radio, live coverage of NASCAR Sprint Cup Series racing right here on Sports Radio 810 WHB and our sister station ESPN 1510. Yeah, we're just talking about Danny Wood. Man, what a pass he made for that win out at Cocopa Speedway over Jason Johnson. That was unbelievable.
Cocopa. I was told by the chairman of the Indian tribe it's Cocopa. So I just want you to know. It's Coca Paul
We
Speedway.
got that corrected.
Yeah, corrected. Okay, we're going to take a break. We're running a little bit late here. We'll be back with more track talk brought to you by McCarthy Chevy, KC.com in a moment.
Track Talk.